what you might want is not necessarily what the receiving ISP wants.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the High Level Spotlight Sessions. Today, I am joined by Krystin Ruschman, the co-owner of Market Compliantly, that specializes in coaching practice owners and marketers on how to do medical marketing with HIPAA in mind. Krystin is also the creator of Email to Inbox, which is her new course focused on email deliverability. Krystin, thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. This is awesome.
We love to have guests on who know what the heck they're talking about when it comes to email deliverability, because it is certainly one of the top concerns of the community, but I feel like it is so shrouded in maybe falsehoods or misconceptions or technical terms that it can often feel very overwhelming. So thanks for coming on to shed some light.
Yeah, happy to. This kind of fell into my lap. It's not like I, decided to start a business one day and just said, oh, I'm going to help people with email deliverability. It was kind of one of those things that developed out of a have to, we have clients too, and we have our own email that we have to get out. And, I had to learn and grow and go through all of those painful processes that everybody has to go through when they have to figure all this stuff out. One of my gifts is I'm a nerd. And so, self-proclaimed, right? My background is nursing. I've been a nurse for 20 years. And so my critical thinking skills pipe up sometimes and I start getting all nerdy about things and I dig in. And
well, I was going to ask you, so that's how you got into email deliverability, just through your own clients and, hey, what's going on here at some point?
Trial by fire, baby. Trial by fire. Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you really sort of broke it down into three key areas, right? So let's start with that. What would you say is the first key area when it comes to making sure my clients' emails are going to hit the inbox?
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about, I did a survey. I just kind of was curious.
Sure, yeah.
Because I could start talking technical mumbo jumbo and everybody's going to be like, wah. Even I would probably be thinking the same thing. But I did a survey. I've still got a survey running actually, and I've been collecting some data from people because I'm curious what they're struggling with. I think I know what the problems are. I do. I feel like I know what the problems are and I can totally help people with them. But it's funny to me, the difference between what I think people need or want versus what they need or want. So I'm going to pop some slides up on the screen real quick and then let's go through those three key areas.
Perfect.
And I'm not even going to bother putting it in like a PowerPoint presentation. Let's just pop through it.
No.
So in terms of like the email to inbox stuff that I've been putting together, it's basically for anybody that has to get email somewhere to do business, right? That's essentially what it is. It doesn't matter whether you're a business owner. Of course, we're talking to marketers right now, but if you're relying on email for some part of your business, then this is important. I went through and asked people some questions on the survey, and what I found out was that everybody has sort of a different version of their goal. They want to stay out of the spam box. They want to stay away from promotions. They want to try to understand that techie stuff or at least have somebody help them through it. All of the statistics, the bounce rates, delivery rates, clicks, opens, replies, all that kind of stuff. They want to send more. They want to send it faster. They definitely want to avoid blacklists and they want to definitely avoid screwing up their client's stuff, right? That's a bad day.
Of course, yeah.
But ultimately, this is what it's about, getting more email to more inboxes. And so as I dug in on that and I started asking people, where are you getting stuck on this? What are the real obstacles or the roadblocks, so to speak? And a lot of it is just, honestly, if you look at the numbers on the stats that we pulled, about over 1/3 of the people that filled out the survey just literally have no idea. They just haven't really dug into email deliverability. They might know that they have a problem, but they haven't had a chance to really figure it all out. It's just too big of a bite, right? They don't understand the technical stuff, which, that totally makes sense. A lot of people are just stuck on, what am I allowed to say? Subject lines, body, what's going to get people engaged, all of those kind of stuff. What words am I not supposed to use because it might hit a spam flag of some sort? And then on top of that, they're not sure what even to look at. Like, how do I even know what my deliverability is? Even people that see stats oftentimes don't know what they mean. Don't know if those are good, bad, or ugly numbers. And so, just a little story. I was helping somebody who had sent out 1,500 plus emails. And by the time we were talking and fixing all of the problems, and his client was pretty ticked off because nothing was really coming of the campaign, lo and behold, only 3 of those actually got delivered. Only 3.
Wow.
I mean, find that stuff out early, right?
Yeah.
You don't have those problems. But then the other questions is like the other side of it that I don't really control, like which SMTP should I use? We get that question a lot in the HighLevel group. You know, what words do I avoid? Am I allowed to use images, links, link shorteners? What's all the rules and regs around that? What's going to get me best practice? The whole HTML versus text discussion comes up a lot. And then the whole, you know, I would call it the blame game, but let's face it, like the big email ISPs, they have some control, you know?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, so that's kind of, you know, what people are telling me that they're struggling with. But the truth is that like hundreds of things actually play into email deliverability. There is no one thing. So anytime you're going through Facebook and you're reading someone's post about this is wrong, that's wrong, can somebody help me? And somebody chimes in and says, well, the first thing, you know, you need to do is you need to X, whatever it is, right? I have a hard time with that because I've been on so many consults with people and I've seen, you know, the deep end of everything that's going on there. And to be honest with you, you can't really make a judgment call like that until you really understand those components that we're going to go through. Because email deliverability is much like a game. And, you know, like the marketer is a person in that game. We have a role, we have a goal, right? The ISP, the receiving ISP has a role, has a goal. The person getting the email, you know, me, I'm reading my email. I have goals about what I want in my inbox as well. And then your SMTP and all the other players in that game. But the thing is that those rules aren't made public. Those goals aren't necessarily made public. You don't know what I'm doing with my email or how I'm deciding what is spam to me, right? But it does play into it. So it is like a big game, and it's not like there's this one thing that's going to fix it all.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I liked what you said. Every player in the game has their own goals. And I feel like a lot of times we forget that, right? So it's like your technical setup could be perfect, but if you keep putting the word up, because like, you know, hammer out like buy this or like it's on sale or like whatever it may be that you're trying to like, you're so laser focused on making your goal happen that you're like, hey, that's not going to work every time because the ISPs have their goals and you're violating that or whatever it may be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every player has a different goal. So it's not like when you get out a board game with your family and you're all trying to get to the finish line, you know, it's a lot different than that because what you might want is not necessarily what the receiving ISP wants or what the receiving wants, right? Yeah. So
okay, cool. So let's dig into it. I'm sure that you could talk about this for hours, but
let's not.
let's focus on the So where do we start? Like where would you start if I came to you and I'm like, hey, my rates are terrible?
I could tell you exactly where we'd start. First, I would have you pull up several tabs and we would start looking at some stuff. When I do consults, I have people fill out a form ahead of time. So I have an idea of, you know, kind of some of the answers to the questions that I want. But ultimately, my job at the beginning of that process is to shut up. It's really just to have you show me some stuff, have you explain to me what you're trying to accomplish, things that you've tried, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what are you struggling with. I want to know all of that stuff because ultimately what I need to understand is kind of what the strategy should be for what you're trying to do. And it's interesting to me how many people don't really think about that. They're out there building the house, but they haven't actually laid out the foundation yet. And so a lot of times by the time they come to me, the call really is focused around strategy for like the first, third of it, because we have to identify if there's any changes that need to be made in that. And we have to kind of talk through how that might affect, what they're trying to do. If they've got 100 clients already, or if they only have one client, there's a big difference, you know?
Right.
But when I'm going to stop my share for a second, because I've got some chicken scratch notes I'm going to pop up on the screen that aren't for public, aren't for public viewing. But basically, when we're talking strategy, we're looking at, what domain are you using? What types of email are you trying to send? Is it transactional email? Is it warm email? Marketing, basic marketing? Is it cold email? Are you doing which SMTP are you using, and what pieces and parts of the SMTP are you using? Are you sharing IPs with other people, or is this more of a situation where you should have your own dedicated IP. These are all parts of the strategy. And we have to figure out what's going to work best for what it is you're trying to accomplish first.
So can I press you on that a little bit? Because I feel like people watching are going to be like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I want to know. So let's assume you're a typical marketer and you are doing lead gen campaigns with nurture campaigns tied to them for chiropractors, whoever it may be, solar, dentist office, whatever it may be. And I'm about to get started and I need to make decisions. Which SMTP would you recommend that I use?
I don't even answer that question. You know why? It doesn't freaking matter. It just doesn't matter. I really don't care which SMTP you're using. We use several. And we've not had any one that stands out as, oh, this one's terrible. Now, I will say that, for me personally, I want to make sure that I have excellent customer service. And so, if you're feeling like you're not getting that from whichever SMTP you're using, then that's something that should be considered,
Sure.
What's the user interface look like? What are the dashboard and the stats look like? Is this a readable, usable, effective tool for you? Because honestly, when it comes right down to it, whether you're using Mailgun, Sendinblue, SendGrid, it doesn't matter. They're all going to put you on shared IPs. They all have strategies in place to make sure that they're as clean as possible. They all provide you with stats and all kinds of other things. And so it doesn't matter. What I want you to be happy. I want you to be able to log into that SMTP and easily use it the way that it's intended to be used and the way that you need to be able to use it for your business.
Okay. So I will throw it out there that at HighLevel, we always recommend Mailgun because we were able to build the best integration with them and we get the most information back. Yep. So if you're looking to do triggering off of stuff, that's where we always push people. But I hear you. So two more questions based on what you just...
Mailgun and SendGrid are like the two. If you're looking for name and reputation, like those are the two main ones out there. So we're
gonna build a full integration with SendGrid next. So Mailgun and SendGrid are going to be the two that we focus on, and beyond that, you're on your own.
Yeah.
Two questions. One, you mentioned shared IPs. You go on Mailgun at $35 a month. You're on a shared IP. Do you think right off the bat it's worth paying more to get up to the level where they'll give you your own IP, or would you start and just hope that you're on a good shared IP?
Again, part of this is going to come down to what you've been doing up until this point and what your email sending needs are. Generally speaking, there's pros and cons, right? Generally speaking, if you're going to go with a dedicated IP, it's because you send a lot of email.
Okay.
A lot, like 500,000, right? A lot. But let's say I'm only sending, a couple thousand, 10,000, and I'm like, gee, should I get a shared IP? Well, keep in mind that if you don't use that IP up to a certain level, if you're not actually making good use of that, dedicated IP, then you're going to take a hit in reputation for that too. You can't just have this big, beautiful, wonderful, all to yourself IP and then barely use it and expect it to perform well. So there's, that's part of the discussion that I have with people is let's take a look at what your needs are first, and then let's talk about what the best solution is for you. If you want to go, with your own dedicated IP, be my guest, but just keep in mind that if you're not using it to a decent level, we can talk about that, on the side, then you're going to be taking a hit for that. So, and on the other side though, if you're using shared IPs, which most people do, and it doesn't matter whether you're with Google or, Sendinblue or SendGrid or Mailgun, doesn't matter. All those shared IPs are shared, right? And so the job of that player in that game, Mailgun, let's say, they're a player in the game too. One of their goals is to keep those IPs clean. And so if you're doing stupid stuff on a shared IP, the next thing that's going to happen to you is you're going to get your hand slapped. You might be put on a timeout, and I've been on consults with people where they literally can't add another subdomain to their Mailgun account because one of the 25 or 100 or whatever that they have on there has been disabled. And yeah. And honestly, one of the big reasons that happens is because as marketers, I'm not saying that you can't have a bunch of like subdomains on your Mailgun account and use one for each client or something like that. But God forbid if you let your client go into HighLevel and start sending out email on their own behalf and you're not like, monitoring for best practices and stuff, that's a risk. right? That's a risk. And sometimes
Okay.
that risk doesn't pay off.
So let's come back to that in a second. You mentioned Google. This is one of my other questions.
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, I really just want to use Google. I already pay for G Suite. I don't want to pay for another thing.
Yeah.
Google it is. What are your thoughts on that?
Again, it's going to come down to what your needs are, right? So for us personally, we use G Suite for a lot. Most of our clients have G Suite because they're medical, and G Suite offers a HIPAA compliant option. So we start them off with G Suite. I like to encourage people to get a Mailgun account as a backup. I think there's, I'm a nurse, right? So my critical thinking skills pop in there, and I'm like, okay, I always have to have option A, option B, because on the day option A doesn't work, I want to be able to just like click a toggle button and flip over to option B.
Right.
But G Suite, there's a warm-up process. It doesn't matter which one you're using. There's always a warm-up process. But if you're okay to warm up to that point and you don't really need it past a couple thousand a day, then G Suite is totally doable. For people watching, we use G Suite, and just for our own business, even, we use G Suite. We have a Mailgun account, several subdomains, and then we also have our own SMTP server that sits in my business partner, Joe. He has an office that sits in. And that one is, primarily for what I would call the crazy crap, right? So it's not easy to set up your own SMTP. I don't profess to understand what all he had to do to make that happen, but I know that he made it happen and it works for us. And so that's one of the things that we do.
Quick question out of curiosity. When you set up G Suite, I'm personally curious, do you do the turn off two-factor, turn on less secure apps method?
Yeah, so I actually have a fleek on this, if you're familiar with the fleek videos, right? I have a fleek on this. I provide it to clients when we're getting them set up. And if you go straight into HighLevel and you just try to throw your Google account in there, whether it's a Gmail or a G Suite, and we can talk about that later. If it's Gmail, just stop.
Exactly.
Get a real email account, okay? But because you're gonna have all kinds of deliverability problems with that. But if it's Gmail, then what you have to do in your account settings is different than if it's G Suite. In G Suite, you have to go into the admin level first and turn on less secure apps. And then you can go into the account level and turn on less secure apps. If for some reason, you've accidentally fired a security warning before you figured all that stuff out, then you got to go deal with the security warning as well, and so I just kind of took screenshots of all of that and put it in a fleek so that I can give it to our clients, to make sure that they understand sort of the roadmap for getting that done. But yeah.
Ooh, I would love to see that fleek, because we need to improve our help doc on this, because I feel like half the time when I try to help somebody set up G Suite as their SMTP, it just doesn't work. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you.
Rule number 1, don't do it in HighLevel first. There's because you'll fire a security warning if you do that. And that's embarrassing if it's your client's account.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because they get this email that says that something, security wise is up with their account, and then you have to explain it to them. And it's just, yeah.
Okay, great. So let's talk about, before we go down the 3 paths here, cold email, because this is a hot topic. Hey, I'm just getting started with my agency. I need to get my first client. I've been told that cold outreach is the way I need to go.
Yeah.
What do you recommend to people that want to start with cold email outreach?
I'm probably not the best person to give advice on cold outreach. That is not our standard procedure. The SMTP that we have that Joe uses for cold, he always jokingly says that he uses it for tests. So he might send emails out to 100,000 or 350,000 people on a list. But at first he's cleaning it, and then he's kind of sending out emails. And then what happens after that is we accidentally get clients out of it because we're not intending to. We're not doing cold outreach to get clients. We aren't even doing cold outreach. He sends a bunch of emails sometimes cold because he's trying to clean a list and kind of see what people are responding to. It's more like research and development.
Gotcha.
So I just want to make that really transparent that I'm not a cold outreach expert. But honestly, I mean, when you're doing cold outreach, you're going to run into all kinds of potential spam issues because I don't know if you guys are aware of this, besides the fact that the lists aren't necessarily clean. And so you should make sure that they're clean before, that those are real email addresses. There's also fake email addresses that are often on those lists that the ISPs like Google or Yahoo are looking for, because if you're sending to one of those addresses, then they know that you are a spammer, essentially, because you've got some,
And do you know of a tool to clean your list? Do you know of a tool to clean your list that knows those email addresses that will pull them out?
Well, I mean, any tool should find those because they're not real. They're not valid email addresses. So we use the checker. I'm not saying the checker is like the tool. It just happens to be the one that we use because they had a great deal on AppSumo. So,
and what's the URL for that if people are looking for a cleaner?
It's the checker, CHECKER. Let me look it up on my screen while we're talking, but I will get it for you. Awesome. But there's others. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people in here that have ideas on which of the tools they like the best.
Mm-hmm.
The checker.
And if you can't find it right now, that's fine. We can always.
That's fine. That's fine. It's thechecker.co.
Okay, awesome.
I would never have heard that.
I'm sure a lot of people will be happy that you shared that. Okay, so you mentioned splitting up, creating a new domain, subdomain in your Mailgun account for each client. Is that something that you preach?
So again, it comes down to what you're trying to accomplish, right? So I'll give you an example. In terms of strategy, when you're trying to figure out which domain I should use, should I share domains? Should I do subdomains? Should I use the root domain instead? Or, should I even put all my clients' domains on my master, like Mailgun account, right? There's lots of questions about that. And there's no single answer because it really comes down to what you're trying to accomplish and what's the best way to get that done. I have some core beliefs around that because I've seen some crazy crap. And so,
do share.
So, I mean, that example I gave earlier about the person who had one disabled subdomain on their master account, which affected their master account, and now they can't add any more subdomains to it. I mean, if you're bringing on clients and you're all of a sudden not able to add another subdomain to your master Mailgun account, that's a problem, right?
Right.
And so now you have to stop and you have to deal with the disabled subdomain, and you got to deal with the client who went in and did some emailing stuff in HighLevel they shouldn't have done, which got it disabled in the first place. So, you have to it's a risk reward, right? What is the risk reward for doing it the way you want to do it? Another use case, we do Google reviews. We offer Google reviews to people for like a month for free as a lead magnet. That obviously is a strategy that we're not the only ones using. But in that case, am I going to go, through the rigmarole of trying to get access or deal with, DNS settings for my client's domain? No, I'm not. We have a subdomain that we would use for that. That's ours. And, we just create a new sub for that particular, or we have a domain, that we use that's ours. And then we create a sub for that particular client. And that way, if they never talk to us again after a month, it's like, it was easy peasy. You know what I mean? We're not worried about it. But they just gave us their entire list. And with us, they signed a BAA. And so you want to talk about micro commitments. By the time we've done a month's worth of, Google reviews for them, obviously the next question is, what else can you do, right? So we would move that direction. And then we would talk with them about domain strategy and try to set something up. Another story, just to kind of give an example, we have a client who's a marketer. Her client bought a business. That business came with its domain, right? It's a whole email account and all the stuff that came with it. Unfortunately, the person that bought the business did not know that domain was already blacklisted. And so, the marketer goes to set up all of the stuff to start running the campaigns and starts to run into all kinds of problems. And lo and behold, it's because that domain was blacklisted. So we had to kind of help walk her through all of the steps that it took to identify first, what are all the issues? Because it wasn't just that. And then second, what do we do to correct them? And then obviously you have to make sure you can move through those corrections as fast as possible, or what are you going to do in the meantime? Are we going to buy another domain that's close and just start working with that one? So those are the discussions that we have to have.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, the fact that you have the options in HighLevel, I think is amazing. And a lot of times when I'm onboarding new agency owners, they're confused and upset that they have to go figure out this SMTP thing. And I'm like, it's actually a great thing for you because it opens up all these options for you to have, like you're saying, one and then a backup ready, and maybe you already have it configured in HighLevel and you're just switching a toggle.
Yeah.
So I think, the complexity is really something that I think is fantastic, but there is a lot to know and a lot to think about. So technical stuff, there's a lot of it. Do you feel like, because one of the reasons why I love Mailgun is, look, they tell you to set up 5 DNS records.
Sure.
The first 2 of those are pretty technical, right? You definitely want to set those up. And if you don't know what you're doing, you wouldn't even know that you need to go do those or how to even create those values, right? So do you agree that that's pretty thorough, those 5 records, or is there way more that you can or should be doing from the technical side?
No, I mean, that's good. So, I mean, if it's a new domain, it's even easier. But if it's somebody that's had a domain, they've used 2 or 3 different email accounts or SMTPs before, and they've got just a jumble of crap all in their DNS records. I mean, there's a cleanup process that has to take place first. There's a discussion around that. But as far as Mailgun is concerned, yes, that's one of the things I love about them is that they line out those DNS records. They don't necessarily tell you whether you should include the root, when you put it into, because that's up to you to figure out what your host wants. But the thing they're missing, well, a couple of things they're missing. One is that the DMARC record is not part of that, right? And why would it be? Because the DMARC record is not specific to the subdomain that you just put into Mailgun. It's specific to the root domain, and you only need one, even if you've got 100 subs. So it's not like, and you can't have 2. So it's not like Mailgun's going to say, go do this, because people will do it and they might already have one, and that's a problem. So it's not specific to Mailgun. That one you have to kind of figure out yourself. But the SPF,
so how do I figure that out? Because again, that's sort of over my head. Like I know DMARC, you should have it, but I think you just shed a lot of light on it. So there should only be one, and it's relative to the root domain, not any of your subdomains.
Right.
So how do you figure out how to set up a DMARC?
All these rules, I like to explain it in layman's terms, okay? So basically, there's 3 records. I'm not going to get into MX because in the CNAME and all that stuff, but there's 3 basic email deliverability records, right? There's the SPF, which is kind of like your insurance card. And if you're going to drive that car, if you're going to send that email, then you have to have a valid insurance card. That's what an SPF record is basically saying. But within the SPF record, over in that second field, you have to list literally who the licensed drivers are for that insurance card. So if it's Mailgun, it's include : mailgun.org, right? If it's Google, it's include : SPF _ google.com, something like that. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but basically you're putting the licensed drivers in there. So if you show up with an SPF record that says you're licensed to drive through Google and the email doesn't come through Google, then that's a deliverability problem, right? Which is, it's usually not your problem. It's usually whoever's trying to spoof your domain, right? So that's a good, you want the insurance card, you want to list out who's licensed to drive it. So it's all legit, it's authenticated. And then there's a DKIM record, which is basically just an encryption key that the receiving provider kind of bounces against and says, are you who you say you are, right? Are you coming from the domain that you say you're coming from? And does who you say you are match who you say you are in the sending? So there's a from and a sending. So it's like if you show up at my door and you say, hi, my name's Chase and I'm from HighLevel, but you've got a shirt on that says my name's Tom and it has, company B on it, right? I'm looking through the peephole and I'm like, I am not sure I can trust that this guy is who he says he is, right?
Yeah.
And so, if you came to I probably wouldn't just open up my door and let you in the inbox. I'd probably have some additional questions. I'd be looking at your SPF. I'd be looking at DMARC, and then I would maybe even send you around to the back where the bouncer's at, right?
Okay.
Or maybe you'd end up in the spam door because I'm just not quite sure I can trust you. You don't look legit, right? You're not
okay.
So that's
I love these layman analogies. All right, I can't wait for the DMARC one.
Well, you'll love this one.
Okay.
It's kind of embarrassing, but here's the story that goes with DMARC. DMARC is like a second layer of protection. So you're not required to have it. SPF DKIM is necessary, and that, by the way, the company where the domain was blacklisted, the reason that domain got blacklisted is because they were sending email after email after email and they didn't have proper authentication set up. Don't do that. Okay. Over time, that will cause you a problem.
And again, if you're using Mailgun, they walk you through the first two that we just talked about. You have to set them up. It's part of the process. So you've already done that.
And you can
but now
even click a little
DMARC.
button to validate them, like, yay, did it right.
Exactly. Yeah, it's great.
So DMARC's like a second layer. It wasn't around in the beginning. SPF DKIM came along first, and then there was some realization that even that can be hacked or spoofed, and so they came up with the second layer. And so DMARC basically it bounces again at SPF, it bounces again at DMARC, and it kind of does a second layer of protection. So the way I like to explain that is that when I was 17, 18, it was a while ago, a friend of mine got a hold of a couple of fake IDs.
Okay.
This is the embarrassing part. And and we were testing the waters and going to different like bars and stuff, and having a good old time, I might add. And then we got to this one bar, and the guy, asked us for our ID. I mean, I was like 17. I was not 21. I didn't look 21, so I'm kind of surprised we were able to do what we were able to do. But here you go. So he looks at the ID, and he kind of does and then he finally decides I'm going to let him through. And on comes this other guy. We'll call him DMARC, okay?
Okay.
So the DMARC bouncer comes over and he goes, wait, hold on a second. Let me see that. And he takes a look at the ID, and he's looking at us, and he starts asking us some additional questions. Do you have another piece of ID that you can put with this? Oh, no, we just brought that one. So he ended up holding on to the ID and told us we had to go back to wherever and get a second piece, and then we could come back and get our driver's license back and blah, 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 right? He was smart. The dude was on top of it. But that's essentially what DMARC's about. It's a second layer of protection. It's the other guy that comes along and goes, let me look at that again. Let me take a second peek. And thankfully, that was kind of the end of my bar bouncing days when I was 17. Okay. Because some dude came along and did the right thing at the right time in my life, and probably protected me.
Interesting. Okay. So how do you know, is there an easy place to go to or an easy tutorial to reference to figure out how to set up your DMARC?
I'm happy to help people with that. DMARC has, technically, DMARC has a lot of components to it that you can, the DMARC record could be like a mile long. It doesn't need to be. There's only two required elements to DMARC, which is the policy, the version, V equals DMARC 1, right? That's the first part that's required. And then the second part that's required is just the policy, which you're either going to say none, wouldn't recommend that, kind of like not having one.
Okay.
You can quarantine if you just want to kind of like keep track of what's going on with DMARC and make changes, like actual educated changes. Or you can just say reject, which basically means that second bouncer comes along, and if he finds an issue when he bounces against SPF and DKIM, you're out of there. You're not even going into the email. So there's 3 different policies you can choose from. None is not a good idea. Quarantine is fine. I would recommend doing some reporting, which adds a couple more elements to the DMARC, and that way you can kind of see how it's working. But if you're like, no, my authentication's good, I've got proper SPF, I have proper DKIM, I'm not worried about anything not being properly authenticated, then V equals DMARC 1, and then a P equals reject is perfectly fine.
And this is a TXT record as well?
Yeah.
Okay. And so is DMARC then more for inbound email?
DMARC is for outbound. DMARC is where you're sending email, and the receiving ISP says, the receiving ISP has basically got their, eyeglasses on, and they're taking a good hard look at who you say you are, and if you're showing up using the right license and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So your policy is basically saying, look, if I'm sending you an email, and it doesn't validate, either quarantine it or reject it, or
you got to eat your own pie. Yeah. If you're not authenticating properly, then you're basically telling the receiving ISP to reject it. Which
and now I see
what
you mean, that it plays off of the DKIM and the other one. So it's basically saying, hey, go check those 2 things. If they don't check out, do one of these 3 things. You have my full
permission to just slam the door shut. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So
that's a protective measure for your domain, right? So that if somebody is hacking it, and that happens a lot.
So that just basically gets rid of spoofing and all that kind of stuff, because you're shutting it. You're saying, hey,
somebody doing some crazy crap. Yeah, I had a domain one time that somebody hacked, and it was a website, and by the time I found out about it, this person or people, I don't know, they had built over 25 extra pages off my domain. I couldn't see them in WordPress. Like, it was just the stuff that I built in WordPress. But when I dug into it, I was like, oh crap, there's a whole lot of stuff happening with what looks like my website that is not my website. So, that's never a fun day. But that was a website, that wasn't email, but it kind of gives you an idea. It's not that hard to do.
Gotcha. Okay. And so one question that I have for you is, talk to me about the relationship between the authority of a subdomain and the root domain. So like, if I'm talking about doing cold outreach, should I just make a subdomain and do it through that? Or should I go buy a different domain, a different root domain?
Separate the crap out of it. Yeah. I mean, that's just a protective measure. I know, plenty of people are going to do that differently, and that's fine. For me personally, I would not want my cold outreach mixed with anything else that I'm doing that's warm or transactional. I wouldn't want my domain associated with it. So now, I mean, I guess that kind of depends on what kind of cold outreach you're doing too, right? There's so many variables, Chase. It's not like you can just go, oh, do this and always do it that way. I mean, it's not that you can't send cold outreach with like a sub of your root domain, but don't do stupid stuff. Like, don't just go buy a list and just send it to everybody. I mean, at least clean it up and do it in batches and sort of see how people are reacting, and, get all of your ducks in a row. But my preference would be that I would want either a separate subdomain or very much so a completely separate domain if I was doing cold. It's a separate thing. It's a separate beast.
Gotcha. All right, so I know that we sort of meandered all over the place here, but what else do you have that you feel like is a must know, or a tip that you can share with us, or what else did you want to get across about deliverability?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess do we have questions? Maybe they can tell us what they want to know. I mean, the three aspects to a quality deliverability program is going to be, number one, like, take a look at the strategy. Consider your overall domain strategy, all the stuff we've been talking about, what kinds of email types you're sending, how much, how often, like the volumes and the volume swings. Think about which SMTP or SMTPs you want to use to make that happen. And then, kind of evaluate whether a shared IP is acceptable, which for most people it's fine, or if a, dedicated IP is more appropriate. But once you figure all that stuff out, the next absolute thing you need to do is get your authentication in place. So that's the SPF, the DKIM, the DMARC stuff. And, when I work with people on that, I mean, my whole goal is to not get technical. My whole goal is to just be like, here, we're going to do this, and here's why. Here's how that works. Here's the layman's terms around it. You don't need to think about this again. I just want to make sure that you understand that I'm not just walking into your DNS settings and making changes willy-nilly. Like, this all, is for your benefit.
Right.
But then the third component of it really comes down to behavior. These are things that people have to get in check. The behavior, even how new your domain is matters, right? In terms of like which domain you're picking. Is it brand new or has it been seasoned, kind of a thing? Are you cleaning your lists? Are you warming up your lists? Are you offering value? Are you staying away from spammy words or phrases? I mean, all of those things kind of come into play.
Let's flesh that out a little bit.
Sure.
But I just wanted to throw out, so yeah, if you're watching in Facebook and you do have a question, just throw it into the comments and we'll loop back on those. Okay, so you just said something that made me think of something I wanted to ask you, which was, now I forget, so we'll come back to it. Oh, no. Let's talk about, okay, so we've talked about the technical side, authentication and all that, and now you just mentioned spammy words.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about this. So there's a quality filter that the ISPs have as well, right?
Right. In context, right? I mean, I don't know if people realize that, but when you send an email, they are reading it. They're not just receiving it. They're actually reading it. And so, it's not necessarily that like the word marketing or the word free is going to be an automatic spam flag. But in the context of the email, with all the other words and the other, phrases that you're using, it could be a problem. And so, like for our clients, I just offer them a document that I actually got from Oracle that basically it's like 3 pages of spammy words and phrases categorized that kind of helps people, get an idea of things that they should avoid. But that's not to say you can't ever use the word. Sometimes you have to play with it. When I start a new campaign, since we're talking to high level users, I always, in every location, I build a campaign called email testing. And I don't ever publish it. Obviously, it's just for me to do tests with. And I run, if I'm going to try something new, like a new link, or I want to add a picture, or, you know, whatever it is I'm going to do, or HTML, then I'll throw it into the email test first. And I have various testing tools that I like to use. I'll go ahead and throw tests out there. Because I want to see, like, if I tweak this, what happens? If I tweak that, what happens? And that way, before I actually go live with it, before I actually start sending it for reels, right? I want to have an idea of what potentially could cause some problems for me. And I want to have addressed those things as much as I possibly can. You're never going to stay out of spam. There's no such thing as never spam. There's no such thing as never in the promotions folder, right? Because again, I don't know if people are aware of this, but it's not just the ISP that's making all these decisions. Like, Google's not sitting there going, okay, here's our artificial intelligence, and we're gonna, you know, if you do this, that, or the other thing, then you're not getting in, right? Part of what plays into that is how I personally use my email box, how you personally use your email box. So if I typically do, you know, certain actions with certain types of emails, then that's taken into account as well. So that means that if I could send out an email, let's say to 100 Google users, some of them might end up in spam or promotions. I guess it's promotions. Some of them might end up in the inbox.
Yeah. And that goes back to what we were talking about, is like, oftentimes the marketer building the campaign, its goals, are literally opposite of the marketer as a person and their personal inbox, right? It's like, if you were to turn it around and be like, all right, I'm going to send this to you. It's like, no, send that to my promotions folder, or you know what I mean? So it's like, you know,
as a user, like, you do have an effect on how, you know, campaigns are going to be sort of sorted out when they come to you. I get stuff in my spam all the time that's stuff I don't want. And I love that. I love that whoever it is that's managing that crap knows that I don't want it, right? And then I'll go in and I'll unsubscribe to things as I get a time, you know, to do it. But every once in a while, something shows up in there that I do want. And the best thing that you could possibly do, not just for the person that sent it to you, but for you also, so that that kind of stuff doesn't keep going into spam, so you don't miss something, because I only look at it like once a week, you know, is mark it as safe, or, you know, slide it over into the inbox, something like that, because you're teaching, as a user, you're teaching the system what it is that you want it to do for you, right? And so I'm helping the person that sent me the email, but I'm also helping myself so that the email works better for me as a user.
All right, 2 questions. I remembered my first one. You're monitoring your deliverability rate.
Yeah.
What are you expecting to see? Like, what's the threshold where you're like, whoa, that is too low, I need to start working on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd like to see high 90s, but keep in mind that deliverability, when you see that like on a dashboard somewhere, that just means they got the email. It doesn't necessarily mean it went to their inbox, right? So you can't look at it and go, oh, 97.34%. That doesn't mean that that's all in the inbox. So you're looking at other things too. You're also looking at, you know, the reply rates, and if they're clicking on links, and what kind of bounce rates you're getting, and things like that. How many people are marking you as spam, you know, spam complaints. There's a lot of different stats, and there's tools that you can use to get more dug in on those stats. But just keep in mind that every time you add something like that to your process, you're also potentially increasing the number of times you're going to end up in spam, right? Because they're all like those links that are kind of behind the scenes, like banana tags, something like that. So you want to just be careful about that. There's a threshold, like, what do I need to know in order to make good decisions? And what do I just need to make good decisions about without, you know, actually having raw data?
Well, those points play into my next question, which is kind of a curveball. And if you don't want to answer this question, I totally understand. But all these things that you're saying that you're doing are so thorough, right? It's like, oh my gosh, how much time does she spend on one client doing all these things on a campaign? So, like, you know, there's a trade-off, right? If you're putting in all this time, you don't have that time to put into somebody else, What do you charge typically? Like, what's your average cost per client that allows you to put this amount of work into a single campaign?
Well, so that's irrelevant. I mean, I do what I do because I want things to work, right? I don't look at the situation and go, well, I'm going to charge you more because I have to do extra stuff, you know? And besides that, a lot of what I'm doing is more like research. It's not even specific to that client. Link shorteners,
Okay.
for instance, right? Link shorteners, and they're a problem for most people. They don't realize that like using a bit.ly link is gonna cause you a problem. But if you have a moment to go in and do the crazy stuff that I like to do with testing, you can go into like the email test campaign, and you can throw in a link shortener from bit.ly and then send it to, I send it to myself. I have several email addresses I send to, so I can test like Outlook, and I can test Google, I can test whatever. And then do a different link shortener, same link, but just a different link shortener, and see if that makes a change. And once you learn that kind of stuff, because this is the kind of stuff I like to play with, once you learn it, then it's not like you have to do it over and over again, right?
Sure,
I mean,
sure, true.
okay, don't use that link shortener anymore.
Well, so fair enough. So have you done any tests around HighLevel trigger links?
I haven't, other than, this is more text. It's text related. So like we used a trigger link in a text. It's actually, well, I won't go into detail, but anyway, it wasn't getting through to T-Mobile. And long story short, what I found out in going through all of this stuff was that T-Mobile just had a problem with my domain suffix. It wasn't the trigger link itself. It was the domain suffix, because that's part of the strategy, right? Is that if you're going to use what's called a non-trustworthy domain suffix, then you're going to take a hit. And so, if you're using .com, .co, .net, .org, .edu, .gov, those are essentially the ones that are considered trustworthy. But if you're getting fancy about it and you're doing, .coffee, .media, .shop, whatever, all those fun ones that are out there that look so tempting.
.yoga, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. They're great for some stuff, but just keep in mind that those are considered non-trustworthy domain suffixes, and potentially that could move you more towards the spam side of things. So you want to be careful about what you're choosing for your domain.
Really interesting. Yeah. I found just in some personal testing, like bit.ly links in text messages, I have a dial pad account, so it's like not a real phone, but I can receive text messages. They won't even come through if it has a bit.ly link in it. So like I know that there's definitely a risk in using link shorteners, which is interesting because doesn't Google have their own link shortener? How does their link shortener play? Have you ever tested that one?
I haven't done that. We use Switchy. We use switchy.io, SWITCHY, switchy.io. Again, it was just an AppSumo deal that was like, and it works great, because just like you can add your domain to HighLevel, we can add domains to Switchy. And that way, when your link shows up in that email, it matches the domain that it's coming from. So it's a beautiful thing. It actually helps a lot when you do that kind of stuff. It's just little stuff.
Very cool. Yeah. Very cool. And is .io considered a trustworthy suffix? Do you know?
No.
No? I feel like it's really popular nowadays, right?
Yeah. Well, and we use it. So again, I'm not saying like, it's not like black and white. Don't do this, do that. Because you can get away with stuff, but you just have to decide, what's the risk reward. And our, marketcompliantly.io, that's our domain, and we have subs for that for various sending purposes. And, we're also watching all of the other hundreds of things that could be a problem for email deliverability. And so we're accepting of that potential issue, but we also know we're doing our very best on the other potential issues. And so you kind of look at it as a whole,
Right. Okay, cool. Well, Richard just asked a question. What about .world? I'm going to go ahead and say that's not one of the trusted ones.
There's 6, .com, .co, .net, .org, .edu, .gov. Those are the 6 that are considered trustworthy by most standards. So I'm not saying that won't change tomorrow. I'm just saying that's the general best practice for today.
All right, awesome. I saw another question or two over here. So let me open this up. All right, so Livy has a question. I'm sending up to 10,000 emails a day cold to cleaned emails via Amazon SES. I was wondering how many emails is too many? What are the risks of sending up to 100,000 a day?
People can do that. You're not going to be able to just go from 10,000 to 100,000 next week. You still have to move in that direction. But as long as you're maintaining best practice on all of the stuff that kind of supports around that, that's no reason that you can't get up to that kind of a number. Obviously you'd want to be on a dedicated IP doing stuff like that. And you want to really be watching your stats and making sure that you're paying close attention. We always say what gets measured gets managed, right? So don't be one of those like, la, 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 and not pay attention to that kind of stuff because it's telling you things. And just, be a good steward of the people that you're sending those emails to. I know that they're cold, but, be a good steward of the fact that you're trying to get into their line of sight, and make sure that you're offering them value, that you're not just throwing crap at the wall and seeing who responds to it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's doable. It's not something that I would ever need to do, but it's definitely doable. You just don't want to move too fast, and you want to make sure that you're watching those numbers and that you're doing the right thing all the time.
So you would do a steady ramp. You'd go from 10,000 a day to 20,000 a day to
Sure.
50,000, something
Yeah,
like that.
like on a weekly basis, something like that. I would just, and if it becomes an issue, if you're watching your stats change in the wrong direction, I love those graphs like that Mailgun offers, how they show the little lines going up and down and stuff. Over the course of the weeks, as you're making those kinds of changes, watch and see what those stats are showing you. And if you have to back off a little bit, but just, that's why I'm saying it's not just something you do blindly, and you definitely don't just do it all at once. But Mailgun has big companies. I can't even think of any of them right now, but I know that Sean's mentioned it. Like Mailgun has some really large customers, and they send a lot of email. It's not that it can't be done. It's just you have to understand what it takes to be able to move in that direction in a responsible, accountable way. So. Sure.
Side question, random question. Do you handle unsubscribe in Mailgun, or do you handle it in HighLevel?
Oh, you know what? I love this question. I love this question because I was just talking with Sean about this yesterday, and I said, Sean, here's what we need. So let me just tell you, like if you do the unsubscribe in Mailgun, for instance, then Mailgun's not going to send that email address anything ever again if they hit unsubscribe, which is a problem if you need to send them an invoice or some kind of transactional email, right? So all of the people that are using Mailgun's unsubscribe, just keep that in mind. It's kind of like a DND. And if that's okay with you, then that's fine. But if you don't realize the potential loss that you have by having somebody unsubscribe to some marketing email, and then now you can't get anything else to them, that's a problem. There's a few clients that I've worked with, one in particular, I won't mention his name, but he just came up with this awesome idea. I was telling him that I would like to be able to use trigger links. We were talking about that a minute ago. I'd like to be able to use trigger links for unsubscribe. And you can, it's just that right now it's a lot of work because you have to build a separate trigger link for each campaign that's specific to that campaign. And then you can build triggers off of that basically says if they click this trigger link to unsubscribe, then I want the action to be unsubscribe them from that campaign, right? Maybe tag them with that tag or something like that. But it doesn't like D&D them or take them out of everything. But the thing that we're missing right now, so if any of you, can plug this for me, that'd be awesome. Sean took notes on it yesterday during our conversation, so I don't actually have like an ID number to give people. But I would like to be able to say, if they hit that trigger link in X campaign, then I want them to be unsubscribed from X campaign. If they hit that trigger link in Y campaign, I want it. And I'm sure that functionality is going to help people with a lot more stuff than just what I want to use it for. But that'd be fan-freaking-tastic. And then the gentleman I was telling you about, he built a funnel so that if they hit the trigger link, it takes them to the funnel that basically is what you and I have already seen as consumers, right? We've seen these things where they pop up the page that says, we're sorry to see you go. You've been successfully unsubscribed. And then it asks a question like, what do you want to unsubscribe from? Or why are you leaving us? That kind of stuff. And so then he built out this beautiful, custom field with these options. And then there's an other at the bottom of it. So, and that's part of being responsible and accountable to the people that you're sending to, right? You're basically saying, help me understand what I'm doing wrong. And then hopefully you're making some changes based on that data. So that's beautiful. I have done one other really weird thing that I'm kind of playing with right now where I basically don't have a link. I have a statement. It's a one practice owner place, a few hundred emails here and there. And it basically says, by the way, if you don't want to receive any more emails from me, just let me know. Because that way they have to reply back and I get reply rates off of that, right? And they get out of the email game. Like I can take them out.
Well, that's interesting, because I always thought that if there's not an actual unsubscribe link in there, then that was a factor that could influence
Yeah,
deliverability.
I'm glad you asked me that. There's can spam, right? Well, I'm going to read it to you like verbatim if I can find it here. Tell recipients how to opt out of receiving future emails from you. Your message here. I'm going to put this on the screen. I'm going to put this on the screen for you, okay? Because I'm not just making this stuff up. If you guys just search ftc.gov and you go to the Can Spam Act Compliance Guide for Business, right? It's in plain English. Number 5. Tell recipients how to opt out. It doesn't say anything about it having to be a link.
Interesting.
Right? And now how many of you guys are not doing some of this other stuff though? That's the problem, right? So that's part of what I want to make sure people understand as they work with me. You know, as clients come on and they do email deliverability consults with me, or they go through a course or something like that, this is the stuff we're going to be including in all of that conversation, because, you know, we have to protect ourselves. I don't know if you guys realize what the penalties are, but they're ridiculous. They're ridiculous. And that's per email. Per email. It's not worth it. I mean, these things are so easy to do, but you can get creative with them. There's even language in here that says like, I can't find it right now, but it says that we don't specifically tell you how you have to do this, but, and then they go on to describe what you need to do. So there's a lot of leniency, a lot of flexibility in how you make sure you're following these rules, but, you know, do follow them. So yeah, I just thought it was fun. You know, it's a small client. She's not doing much email. We're talking like 10 a day, right? So if somebody's replying back that they don't want emails, it's really not like I have to hire some assistant or get a VA on it. Like it's just easy to deal with it, but I get a reply out of it. Why not?
All right. So we've got one last question here. We just hit an hour, and man, that flew by. We talked like, oh, it'll be 20-minute chat.
It was going to be 20 minutes. Oh my gosh.
All right. One more question. What solutions have you found for emails in Europe that are subject to GDPR rules, and how would you separate those from emails in the US?
I don't even do that. I'll be honest with you. That's not my thing. I try to stay so far away from GDPR. For those of you that don't know me, like my whole business surrounds federal regulations called HIPAA. And when I was nursing for 20 years and I did 12 years of project management and clinical IT implementations for electronic medical records, I was knee deep in compliance, neck deep in compliance daily for years. And so I've been trying really hard to like get away from all of that red tape. And when GDPR came along, I was like, oh my Lord Almighty, what do I have to do to not touch that? And for us, it's not that difficult. So I just haven't had to get into it. Then CCPA came along for California and made my life a little bit harder. It's a state privacy laws that actually make HIPAA look like the easy button.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to deal with that, but no, I'm not the right person to talk with you about GDPR. I can only handle so many federal regulations at a time.
Understandable. All right. So where do people go if they're like, whoa, you know your stuff when it comes to this, and I need help, or I want to learn, or I want to pay you to help me? Where should they go?
Okay. In talking with Sean, in talking with several people that I've done email deliverability consults with, what I wanted to do is come up with something that was specific to high-level users, because frankly, there are some specific things to high-level that play into all of this, right? I mean, there's a hierarchy in the fields, and if it looks to this field and that one's empty, then it goes to that field next. And a lot of people don't understand what that hierarchy is. I've done medical record implementations for 12 years, and I've done a lot of third-party integration work. So nerd, right? Nerd. And there's just some simple settings in HighLevel that make a difference. So what I did, I'm just going to share my screen. I just threw this together like literally yesterday for you guys, because I want to make sure that you have a way to get the information that you need, the help that you need. I want to be able to offer it in the way that you need it, that works for you the best. So I'm doing a course called Email to Inbox, and it is just for high-level users right now. And basically the whole goal of it is to tell you how you can get, or show you and talk you through and walk you through how you can get your emails to the inbox, and without spending countless hours trying to learn all this crap on your own. Yes, I use the word crap because that's me. Okay. You know, what you're going to learn in here, I'll just kind of leave this on the screen, but basically we're going to walk through all of this stuff in layman's terms. I want to walk you through the things that you need to know and understand, but only to the point that you need to know and understand them. And then after that, you guys can let me know what you still think you need to know and understand. I really want to do this as a live beta group. And I mean, depending on how many people want to come into this, obviously I may have to limit it or do a couple of different rounds, but what I really want to do is just bring people in for like half what I'm probably going to charge for the course when it goes live for reals. But I want to teach it live. I want to record all of those sessions and put them in a membership site for people. So if you miss a live, if you're not able to attend it for some reason, then don't, you know, feel like you lost something. All those recordings are going to go in the membership site for you. After the sessions are taught, I'm going to stay on, not recorded, so that we can have live Q&A and you can tell me what questions you have. You can provide input on things that you wish you had more clarification on or things you think I should include. We can share wins, stats, whatever. I just want to make sure that this is really for you guys. And then I just created a private Facebook group just for the people that pop into this beta course with me. So it's not open to general public, people that want to have questions about email. It's not open to every high-level user. It's literally just going to be for people that are in this beta course with me so that we have a place to actually talk through the real stuff, right? And then
Cool.
There is a fast track option. So if you want a personal consult, which I've been doing a lot of, then there is a bump on here. Let me just hit step 2 so you can see it. There is a bump on here. So if you want to do a personal consult with me, it describes all of the stuff that's included. I always offer 100% money back guarantee. Haven't had to, nobody's asked me for that yet, but I mean, I want to make sure people feel really comfortable. If you're popping in here and you're paying an extra, I think this is $397, right? So it's $197 for the course and it's a bump of $397 for if you want the consult. And that's fine. But if you're on the consult with me and you're like, this isn't really helping, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, or she's not able to get to the bottom of my problems, I'm not charging you for that. You know, I'll just refund you and I'll learn something, you know, in that process as well. So that's essentially what that is all about.
And what's the URL?
It's
get.email-to-inbox.com.
Yeah.
/HighLevel beta.
It's email to inbox with dashes. So get.email-to-inbox.com, and then it's a high-level beta. We can throw that in the comments or something.
Yeah.
After you buy the course, it'll take you to that survey that I told you I've been running for other people for a while now to gather data. I need you guys to fill out the survey too, because ultimately this course isn't for me. I mean, it's for you guys. And so the only way that I really know, you know, what your number one goal is, what your number one fear, what are the things that you want to learn, what are the obstacles to you kind of getting through all of this stuff, is if you fill out the survey. And that way, when we start the course, I'm actually talking to you about real stuff that you want to know. I'm actually addressing your real questions, your real needs, your real wants. I don't want this to be like, here's all the technical stuff that Kristen thinks you need to know. No, it's for you. So tell me what you need.
Awesome.
And
well, Kristen, thank you.
I can start that as early as next week. I just want to kind of see what kind of response we get, and then let's go from there.
Well, I'm sure once this video gets out, you'll definitely have some people heading your way, because I know that deliverability is a headache for a lot of the community. And thanks for posting that, Joe. Well, thank you so much for coming by. That was really insightful. I learned a lot of things that I'm going to apply to our onboardings, and I'm definitely going to share this with the onboarding team and make them all watch it. So thanks again for coming by and sharing this all with us.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
All right. Thanks everybody for watching. We will see you on the next episode. Have a great one.
Bye.